Hey, hey, hey. I greet you in the way that my grandmother used to wake us all up in the mornings when it was time to get moving. She would say, rise and shine and give God the glory. So get on up, get on out. How you doing today? Thank you for stopping by and checking out Read with me today. We are a little bit early, er, er than normal, but we have different routine during the weeks that my nephew is here with us, and so we're going to be up a little early so that we can get the young sir off to school, getting his full rest, but also taking care of the assignment to read these scriptures. So today we are in Genesis 39, verse sheet for those of you who are studying uh, Hebrew. Um, and today we're going to be looking at Joseph again. We went back from Tamar and Judah in 39 and 38, and we're back to Joseph, who we were reading about in 37. Took a sidetrack for took a pause for the cause at 38, so that we can see Judah and the role that he plays in causing to live Perez or Perez, depending on which pronunciation you're using or which translation even you're using, and they are key. He is key because that is the lineage that gets us to King David. That is the lineage then that moving forward gets us to Yeshua, to the Messiah, to the Mashiach. So it's important that stop was made, that pause for the cause was made, and now we're back looking at our main story here. We are looking at our brother Joseph, and if you will recall, Joseph is at this point had been sold over to the Ishmaelites, Midianites, depending on again what you're reading, and what we see as we get here, just checking for audio on the videos just to make sure that the stream is working properly. And you know what? I'll leave it open for comments too because I'm finding that I don't get to see. For some reason, the comments are not coming over to StreamYard, but that's neither here nor there. I understand what's going on with that. Read with me. We're about to pick up at the beginning of Joseph's story once he is as things are beginning to happen for him as he arrives in Egypt or Mitzrayim. As you know, we're looking at Jacob's children. We're still looking at Joseph, who is the oldest son of Rachel. Not the oldest son. The older sons are here. By this time, we are at Joseph, who is the oldest son of Rachel. And if you'll recall, we've talked about it. Rachel was the wife that the wife of Jacob's intention, we'll say, when he first meets this family, and he decides that a wife of this family is who he would have, unlike Esau's wife, who is from among the people that were living in the land of Canaan. Jacob has a wife or wives that are of his lineage from his father's family. He's got two daughters. Jacob loves Rachel, decides he wants to marry Rachel through some shenanigans, which clearly runs through their bloodlines. They are shenaniganers. And so through some shenanigans, he ends up with both daughters and they're handmaids. And so we have the mothers of the 12 tribes. I've heard them called patriarchs. I've heard several things, but for this service, for this purpose, we'll call them the sons of Israel, sons of Jacob. There's still one more yet to come. We'll read about a little bit later, Benjamin. But so far we are at Joseph, and we are in today's version. We're using the Net Bible. I know that type may be a little small if you're looking at the screen, but I put it there for me more so than you. Just simply citing the source of the information. And this is a translation that I just literally probably within the last 6 months even came to know about. But it is a translation that I really have benefited greatly from using, especially for my word studies, especially for understanding, the decisions that the translator made when looking at the original language, whether it's Old Covenant or New Covenant scriptures. It is, I think it's helpful, depending on the way that you study and the purpose of your study, to kind of see what the translator had in mind when they made certain decisions. And this Bible does that for you. And what we're looking at here is from Bible Gateway. In their versions, they have information about the version. And this is what they have. I'll read a portion of it. I won't read it all. But it says the Net Bible is a completely new translation of the Bible. It's not a revision or an update of a previous English version. It was completed by more than 25 biblical scholars. Important because there's some versions that I've run across that have one person who did the translating, and they may have used some peers to check their work, other translators, or maybe building upon another translation. But I'm nervous about the work of one person because, yes, that means you're going to have consistency, but it also means you're only going to have one perspective. You're only going to have one check to ensure that your translation is faithful, that your translation is actually true and not so much tampered with perspective wise. It's just a safer bet to use a translation that has multiple translators. And so this one completed by 25 scholars, experts in the original biblical languages who worked directly from the best currently available Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek texts. So these are not people who took a translation and worked with that translation. They went from best available original text and then developed the translation. Most of these scholars teach Old or New Testament exegesis in seminaries and graduate schools, so they're not novices like me, sitting down and telling you what how to translate these words. Furthermore, the translator assigned to prepare the first draft of the translation and notes for each book of the Bible was chosen in every instance because of his or her extensive work in that particular book, not only involving teaching, but writing and research as well, often extending over several decades. Many of the translators and editors have also participated in other translation projects. They were assisted by doctoral students, advised by style consultants, and Wycliffe field translators. Hence, the notes alone are the cumulative results of hundreds of thousands of hours of biblical and linguistic research applied to the particular problems of accurately translating and interpreting the text. That may mean absolutely nothing to you, but it was important to me when choosing this translation. So one of the goals of the Net Bible with the complete set of translators' notes, and we're going to look at one of those translators' notes before we finish today, it's to allow the general public, as well as Bible students, pastors, missionaries, and Bible translators in the field to be able to know what the translators of the Net Bible were thinking when a phrase or verse was rendered in a particular way. And so just as it's important, because context is key, because original meaning and understanding is key in helping make sure that we're not misusing or abusing scripture, it's really important. I think one of the differences in this translation versus others is you get an explanation from the translator on why they took it a particular way. And so all of those things are available to us through the translator's notes. And so they have translator's notes which explain the rationale for the translation, gives alternate translations, interpretive options, and technical information. There's study notes, which include comments about historical or cultural background, which is very important in some passages. Explanation of obscure phrases, words, sometimes they're translating words that aren't even used anymore. And so they explain the reason that they translated in the way that they did, or brief discussions of context, discussions of the theological point made by the biblical author, author is the word, not Arthur, author, cross references, and in the New Testament, references to Old Testament quotations or allusions in the New Testament. And sometimes the note is just miscellaneous information that's helpful to the modern reader. And then there's a text critical note, which discusses alternate readings found in the various manuscripts and groups of manuscripts of the Hebrew Old Testament and the Greek New Testament. And so they do a thorough job of explaining why they chose what they chose, what they were thinking when they made the decision to translate it in whatever way they did. Again, that may mean nothing for you. If it doesn't, just fast forward, because here we go. We're about to jump into our reading. Genesis 39 and 1 starts with, now Joseph has been brought down to Egypt, Mitzrayim, and an Egyptian, a Mitzrayim, named Potiphar, an official of Pharaoh and the captain of the guard, purchased him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him there. Remember them from 37? Yeah. The Lord was with Joseph. He was successful and lived in the household of his Egyptian master. His master observed that the Lord was with him and that the Lord made everything he was doing successful. So Joseph found favor in his sight and became his personal attendant. Potiphar appointed Joseph overseer of his household and put him in charge of everything he owned. From the time Potiphar appointed him over his household and over all that he owned, Yahweh, the Lord, Yahweh, blessed the Egyptian's household for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on everything that he had, both in his house and in his fields. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. He gave no thought to anything except the food he ate. Now, and this was cute, now Joseph was well built and good looking. So he's young and handsome, which helps us understand this next part. So soon after these things, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." But he refused, saying to his master's wife, "Look, my master does not give any thought to his household with me here, and everything that he owns, he has put into my care." So it shows you the trust that Potiphar has placed in his servant here. Would be nice, I guess, if he was able to have the same trust in his wife, but we see Joseph proving to be having more integrity than this woman that we're seeing there. It says, "There is no one greater in this household than I am. He has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. So how could I do such a great evil and sin against God?" That's really interesting, because I know over the last couple chapters we've been talking about how although we haven't made it to Exodus where we see laws and statutes and commandments codified, as the Ten Commandments, we do see that there are certain things that have come into place just after the Noahide times, of just different things and ways that people by this time are crystal clear, or ways that are not pleasing to the Lord. And so we see here an honoring of marriage even before we have, the covenant language that's used in Exodus. So it says, verse 10, even though she continued to speak to Joseph day after day, he did not respond to her invitation to go to bed with her. So she's not just making this a one-time hit and see, if I can get a hold of him. He's having to endure this over time. And one day he went into the house to do his work when none of the household servants were there in the house. She grabbed him by his outer garment, saying, "Come to bed with me." But he left his outer garment in her hand and ran outside. And look, you take that. I'm out of here. But unfortunately, when she saw that he had left his outer garment in her hand and had run outside, she called for her household servants and said to them, "See, my husband brought in a Hebrew man to us to humiliate us. He tried to go to bed with me, but I screamed loudly." So she's decided to flip it now because, um, look, she's been trying to throw it. He won't catch it. Verse 15 says, "When he heard me raise my voice and scream, he left his outer garment beside me and ran outside. So she laid his outer garment beside her until his master came home." Now, isn't that crazy? But isn't it how things happen? Many times you're trying to operate with integrity, you're trying to do the right thing in the way that Joseph did here. But many times what I know from my own life is eventually you get to the place where you end up doing or saying something that you shouldn't. And what they'll hear is what you said, but they won't hear what was done to you. And so this really does show us that we can make the right decision. But unfortunately, what ends up happening for him is because he's the servant and she is the wife of his owner, her word is about to have a little more weight than his because he took off running. He was wise. He saw the door and fled. He resisted the devil. All those things that we talk about doing in the scripture when we're faced with temptation, he did just that. But how many of you know his while he operated with integrity, those that had rule over him didn't? I believe that's why the scriptures encourage us to pray for those who have rule over us, because they do have power, they do have authority, they do have the ability to make decisions that will negatively impact your life if they don't operate with integrity. And so, in times like what we're living in right now, it is so key for us to be praying for those of us who have rule over us. But it's also important to be praying for, our sons and daughters as they're out doing these different jobs, even yourself, covering yourself with integrity when you're in the workplace. What are the steps that you can take to make sure that your good isn't spoken evil of? What are the things that you can do to safeguard, yourself? I know I laughed when I would hear stories like Mike Pence, who talks about how he wouldn't be in a room with a woman without his wife, and how many people made fun of that. But how many of you know what you're never going to be able to do as a result of that is say that you were in a situation alone with Mike Pence. And as we see his life turning out one way, and the person who he worked with situation being completely different because just that integrity concerning his marriage, integrity concerning sinning against his body, being a different focus. So we see what happens here for Joseph. He has integrity. He runs, he escapes, he gets away, but the woman that he was dealing with didn't quite have that same integrity. Verse 17 says, "This is what she said to him when her husband comes home. That Hebrew slave you brought to us tried to humiliate me." So she's outright lying. "But when I raised my voice and screamed, he left his outer garment and ran outside." Now that part is true. That's what makes it deception. That's what makes it a spitefully misusing. And those again are situations that we many times will have to allow the Lord to deal with. But deception isn't all lies. She finagles the truth. She plays around with the truth, but there is some truth in her statement. That's what makes it deceptive. That's what makes it deception. Otherwise, it would be just an outright lie. But she's deceitful. And so verse 19 says, "When his master heard his wife say, 'This is the way your slave treated me,' he became furious. Joseph's master took him, threw him into prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. So he was there in the prison. But Yahweh, the Lord, all capital letters is like giving you what? Tetragrammaton, correct. Says, but the Lord was with Joseph and showed him kindness. He granted him favor in the sight of the prison warden. So even in a terrible place, because of his integrity, he's able to find favor with the Lord. And verse 22 tells us, and this is where I told you we were going to flip over so that you could get a look at what the difference is that's made when you're using that net translation. And what this reads in between all the Strong's references that we're going to use here, it says the warden put all the prisoners under Joseph's care. He was in charge of whatever they were doing. The warden did not concern himself with anything that was in Joseph's care because the Lord was with him, and whatever he was doing, Yahweh, the Lord, was making successful. Now, I took just an opportunity here before we get done to branch off and show you when I was reading to you about the Net Bible. One of the things that it talked about was study notes and translator's notes. There are three in these last two verses. There are three translator's notes. Not that they're impactful or meaningful, but just to show you the information that's available if you use the version of the Net Bible that has those translator study notes and text critical notes. These are all translation notes, though. Okay, so as you'll see here, if you're accustomed to using Bible softwares, that these references here are going to be Strong's references. I use eSword, which based on those Strong's references, it's going to also have some lexicons that you can download. And so these, if we were in the live version of the app, you would see that these will take you over to the actual Strong's reference. Actually, I wonder if I can pick this up just really quickly so that you can see how that works. Just in case you're looking for a new study tool. I use eSword. A lot of people use logos. This device that I have doesn't have logos on it. It has eSword on it. So that is what I'm going to show you. I think I can do that. See very quickly, I hope. Share screen. Hopefully my bandwidth won't go too crazy on us here. And we'll be able to see what we need to see. Let's see if I make it full. That will make a difference. Boom, yeah. What happens if I make it full? Does it make it even bigger? Okay, the view I have here, if I select, if we come down here, and we're down here in 39:22 is where we were, and that's where we're going to stop shortly. So what you'll have down here is in verse 32. If you press on the link there, it will open up a Strong's reference, which will give you, of course, the Strong's reference. But if you have the lexicons available or downloaded, it will also take you through those. And so we have one of the ancient Hebrew lexicons, and so it's going to take you through the pictograph of whichever word it is that you were looking at. And depending on the verse, depending on where you are, where it's used, it gives you a reference here that will let you know which of these is going to be more appropriate. So it's a little different from Strong's, which kind of gives you a general and every way that this word is translated, or most ways that it's translated throughout the scriptures. The lexicons are going to get more specific about the particular letters that are used in the word. The word that I clicked on there was warden. Warden is a head person, but you'll see Sar also used to mean prince. You'll see it some other places used to mean master. You'll see it used other places to mean steward. That's what Strong's is helping you with. And so it's not necessarily specifically saying here in this particular verse, it is being used to say A, B, C, D, E, F, G. The lexicon is actually going to be a little more focused, and it's going to tell you, yep, in that place, it's being used as this. It's being used as that. It's being translated in this way. So that's what you'll see there if you open up that lexicon. And even it'll take you over to the other places, get you closer to the root of the word, where it'll take you to, primitive roots and those kind of things. But that's not what we're here for. We are here right now to look at these translator notes. And so the first one that we saw was in 53. And it's on, he was in charge of whatever they were doing. And it's not even going to show you a whole lot of additional information. But what it's going to tell you is in 53, which is the number of the translator note, and you know that it's a translator note by this little small t in here, translator note from the Hebrew text. It says all which they were doing there, he was doing. This probably means that Joseph was in charge of everything that went on in the prison. That translator note is given to help you understand why they translated it in the way that they did. Again, not a lot of additional information for this particular note, but it helps with understanding why the translator did what they did. But it shows you the care and concern that they used to make sure that you understood the translation decisions that they made. The next one is down here in 54. It's in the sentence, the warden did not concern himself with anything that was in Joseph's care. That first reference that's used there, first translator note, is in 54, which is telling us that in the Hebrew, if you were to directly translate it as the words are laid out, it says he was not looking at anything. For our purposes of understanding, they translated that to the warden did not concern himself with anything. The next one was in 55. He didn't concern himself with anything that was in Joseph's care. Well, that translator note says they were sure to translate this as in Joseph's care instead of in his care. Why? It says the referent Joseph has been specified in the translation for clarity, so that we understand the his that was used there in the original language, that it was referring to Joseph. And so that's the kind of information that you're going to be seeing if you if you use the version that has all of those different references. Just wanted to show you that real quickly, and then we're going to get out of all of it. And so hopefully what you saw there today was the story of Joseph and Potiphar's wife, how he operated with integrity because of the things that have been entrusted to him. As you can see, the sun is coming, so it is time to what? Go. So we're going to go ahead and go. Hopefully, if the Lord allows, we will be back tomorrow and pick up there in Genesis 40, verse sheet 40. Hopefully, you are preparing to go forward into a good day. But not just a good day. What do we have? We have amazing days around these parts. So hopefully you are ready and prepared to go forth into an amazing day. I'm about to go get my young one ready and in the streets for this morning. So I pray that you and your children experience wonderful days at school, at work, whatever task it is that you have at hand. I pray that you are able to fulfill whatever the assignment is for you today. And worry about today. Don't allow the things that you have to do to overwhelm you, overtake you, cause you stress. We talk about stress, and we know stress is probably one of the most lethal things that we deal with. But you add into that pressures, you add into that responsibilities, you add into that even those of you who are dealing with workplace issues similar to what Joseph is dealing with here, where you're dealing with different levels of harassment or just things that come to take your distraction, things that come to cause you to act out in a way that's not your character, things that are pulling on you and tugging on you. The scriptures tell us that if we resist the devil, he will flee. The scriptures tell us that that God is faithful. When temptation comes, he's going to prepare a way of escape. I pray for you today that if you're dealing with any kind of temptation, that the way of escape is so clear to you that you can't miss it. But then we also see in the scriptures stories like Joseph, where you know what, you're going to have to just work through what it is that you have to work through. You're going to go through what it is that you have to go through. But remember, just like Joseph does, some chapters later, we're going to see when he's reunited with his brothers, and then eventually their father passes away. And he makes a very profound statement, and he says to them, because they're certain that at that time, he's going to take revenge for the things that were done to him. And when he's given the opportunity and the authority to take revenge for the things that were done for him, he understood there was a greater purpose. He understood that there was the purpose that the Lord could get. There was the glory that the Lord could get out of the situation. And he tells them, what you intended for evil, God intended for good. And so while you sent me into this situation, I'm put through this situation because your intention was to be evil to me. But because I endured, because I didn't give in, because I didn't allow the temptation to take me down, all of those different things, I'm able to get to the good part. I mean, this son has gotten aggressive, and so it is definitely time to head out. But I just want to encourage you that no matter what it is that you are facing on this day, that if you faithfully endure, patiently endure, if that's what the Lord has told you to do. I'm not telling you to stay in an abusive situation. I would never do that. I'm not encouraging you to remain in a place where you can be misused. I'm not encouraging you to remain in a place where you can be abused. I am simply saying, if the word that you have received into your spirit is go through, that you can make it through, because at the end of the day, there's going to be purpose revealed. At the end of the day, you're going to find that the reason that you weren't able to leave, Joseph's in a different situation than we are many times. He couldn't leave. He's in prison. He's a servant. But you'll find when you're faced with those situations that you simply can't leave for whatever the reason may be. If you will endure, you'll inherit the promise. And so we see him being able to do things for his family that he would not have been able to do. But then too, despite all of that, he never allowed his integrity to drop. And so I pray that today that you're able to lean into the strength that comes from the Holy Spirit, and that you're able to endure whatever it is you need to endure for the sake of the promise that you're attempting to get to. And so that is Genesis 39 for us today. We are going to be back, if the Lord allows, tomorrow. We'll be in Bereshit, Genesis 40, looking at Joseph, the cupbearer, and the baker. So I pray that you have a wonderful day. If you're watching on Facebook, share. I would appreciate it. If you're We are also recording the videos over on YouTube, and you can actually go back and start at that first chapter and work your way through. So all of those are there and available. But I pray that, thank you for stopping by. If you stopped by, thank you for your time this morning, and we're going to head on out of here. So bye-bye.